Whether you recently retired, left your previous employer, or are just looking to simplify your life by consolidating more of your accounts together, one of the steps you'll need to do that is a rollover. So what I want to do today is give you the steps that you'll need to take in order to complete a rollover of an employer-sponsored plan. It's worth noting this video will mostly apply to accounts like a 401k or a 403b. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name's Matt, and as I mentioned in the intro, today I want to share with all of you the steps that it'll take to roll over an employer-sponsored plan, whether that be to an IRA or another employer's plan. As always, just remember, if you like this video, it's a 5-cent donation for charity, and if you subscribe because you haven't already, that is a 10-cent donation to charity as well. We're still climbing the ladder pretty high, and we've broken $30, so thank you again to all of you for the support with helping me grow this into a sizable donation for charity. So I did make some slides for this video just to make it a little bit easier to follow along with, so let's get that pulled up so we can get started here. Now, starting off, we'll start with what you need for this process. And the very first thing, if you want to move it to your own personal accounts, would be an IRA to receive these assets. It's worth noting that a 401k can have Roth assets in it as well, so just make sure if you do have any post-tax money in your employer plan, that you have a Roth set up to receive that money as well. You will also need to know where the plan that you want to move is being held, because that is actually where the rollover will start. But pretty simple. Those are the only two things you really need to get started with this process. Now, just worth noting here, one of the things about a rollover is every employer has their own requirements, and a lot of institutions have different requirements. So this is going to be a high-level overview. Some people might require a form or a PIN or some info like that, but in general, this is exactly what the process is going to look like. Again, with the exceptions of maybe any additional forms or things you might have to sign that your employer requires. So again, step one, have those IRAs established, ready to go. You don't have to fund these IRAs yet. You can always open them up with a $0 balance at most institutions now. So just have that set up and ready to go with where you want the money to land in. Once you have your accounts established, you're going to call the firm that is currently servicing your employer plan that you want to move so that they can give you the steps to start the rollover process. Now, when you call them, they'll explain to you that throughout this rollover, they will sell out of your assets and ultimately will be sending a check over to the new institution. Reason being is because employer plans hold what they call institutional share classes, and that is just something that is not held in a personal account. It's held at the institutional level. You get better expense ratios and it's a cheaper fund to maintain. So that's why when this process starts, it gets sold out of, because your own personal IRA probably does not have the ability to hold on to those assets. Now, the one exception there is with stocks. That's a little bit more deep in the weeds, and I'll cover that a little bit later. Now, once the assets are in a cash position, the firm that was holding the plan is going to write out a check. It's very important that they make the check payable to the firm you want the assets to go to. It'll say FBO, which is for benefit of, or it might say for care of, and then your name. Reason being is because putting the check out to the firm first, then for your benefit, helps make sure that this isn't being paid directly to you and can get deposited directly into an IRA instead of having to go through the hassle of depositing in a bank account, wiring it, proving it's not an extra contribution. So that's why they make the check out to the firm for your benefit. Now, you might be wondering, why are they sending a check? That is pretty prehistoric. I don't know why they don't just wire it. Well, some firms do give you the ability to wire the check, and if that's an option that makes you feel more comfortable, by all means, go ahead. But I will say, I actually, after doing at least 1,000 of these, prefer the check route. Reason being is because if the firm enters in the wrong wire information and that money ends in the wrong account, that is a pain to get fixed. And trust me, it takes about 2 to 3 months to fix those errors because a lot of legal compliance and things like that, and it might not ever actually get fully fixed. And also with a check, if the check gets lost, misplaced, whatever happens, then all they have to do is just issue a stop order and then they just reissue the check. So I know it sounds strange, and I know you would think that it would be more time consuming to write the check, but actually 9 times out of 10, the check route is just the easiest way to go. Now, if they do send the check to you for you to send on to the firm, that's fine as well. My biggest tip I would give there is just make sure that when you send it to the firm you want the money to go to, is make sure you get a tracking number so that way you know where the check is in case it does get lost. Now the process really is as simple as that. When you receive the check or when the new firm receives the check, it'll be deposited as a cash position for either your financial planner to allocate for you or for you to do by yourself. But there are a few additional tips that I'd like to point out before you start this process. And the first one is see if you're eligible to do the rollover. For the majority of the time, if you are still with this employer and you want to roll over the plan, they might not allow for you to do so. And if they do, you might only be able to move a portion at a time. So if you have any questions with that, usually you would either want to call the firm that is servicing your employer-sponsored plan or speak with somebody from your HR department so that they can give you that information. For pre-tax money, so money you have not paid taxes on yet. And also, it's always worth mentioning, your employer is not going to pay taxes for you. So even if you think you're making 100% Roth contributions and your employer does a match, odds are they are doing that in pre-tax money because, again, the employer is not going to pay your taxes for you. So keep that in mind. But it's worth noting with the pre-tax money that you have, in the account, you can move that into either a traditional IRA or a rollover IRA. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they serve the same purpose. The only difference between the two is a rollover IRA can be transferred to an employer plan, but a traditional IRA cannot be transferred into an employer-sponsored plan. As I was saying, you might have Roth in this account. I came across so many people that said, absolutely no way, I have zero Roth in this account. And sure enough, we get the check and it's made out for two kinds of money. It's made out for pre-tax and post-tax. So always verify that. And again, just make sure you have the right account set up before you start this process, so that way you can avoid any further delays down the road with getting your money invested again in the markets. You can only keep the stock. Now, there's this thing called NUA. It stands for Net Unrealized Appreciation, and it's a very complicated thing, but I'll just say if you have a lot of stock in a company, let's say you worked at, Google for a really long time and you have a bunch of stock built up from them in your employer plan, you might want to take advantage of NUA. Now for that, again, net unrealized appreciation. For that, speak to an accountant so they can make sure that it's actually something that's beneficial to you. Sometimes it is, usually it's not, so it's just worth speaking to an accountant to make sure you're making the right decision for that one. But also with other stock, you don't have to do the NUA thing. You could still just leave that in an account and just transfer it over like you would any other stocks. Now this one's important. That's why I wrote it all in caps. Do not put this money into your bank account. Sure, with rollovers, there's a 60-day window, like a grace period, and you can do the rollover. Trust me, this money should never, ever, ever end up in your personal account. While it is possible, as I was saying, for it to go into a bank account, then you can wire into your new investment account, that gets really complicated because it looks like it's an excess contribution. So you have to prove to the IRS that it wasn't, and then you have to prove that that money came from an employer plan. So you just have a lot more work for yourself when it comes tax time if you do put it in a bank account first. So just always make sure that money goes directly into your investment accounts and nothing else. Now, if this process seems really complicated, and again, like I said, it's an easy process, but there are different requirements, and so I understand why some people might feel intimidated by this. Ask your new firm to help. I made that phone call more times than I can count. I would conference call with my client over to the firm where their employer plan is. I would make sure that we got the whole process started correctly, knew any forms that were needed to be included, if any at all, and just ultimately was a resource there throughout the entire rollover process. So do not hesitate to reach out and ask for assistance if you feel like you need it, or if you just want to make sure somebody from your new firm is watching over your account while this rollover takes place. And lastly, if your employer plan is an annuity, make sure that you understand all of your options before starting that rollover process. Sometimes with annuities, if you cash out of them early, there can be a huge penalty associated with it. So make sure that if it is an annuity, you are able to do the rollover. Most employer plans are not annuities, but they do come up from time to time. So it's just something I felt that was important to include here. But that's about it for the process of doing a rollover. So I hope that you found this helpful. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I try to answer those as quickly as I can to make sure I'm helping you in a timely manner. But again, let me know any questions you might have about this process, or if you need me to go into more detail on one of these topics here. Remember, if you like this video, that's a 5-cent donation, and if you subscribe because you haven't already, that's a 10-cent donation. So like and subscribe as well if you want to, but I'm not really here to tell you what to do. All that said, I'm going to wrap up here, so thank you so much for taking the the time out of your day to watch this. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're right here with me, and I really appreciate that. But I'll let you go ahead, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.